Welcome back to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. Bradley Hamner is a seasoned entrepreneur and business strategist who helps business owners transform their leadership roles through systematic organization design. As the host of the Above the Business podcast, he shares insights on building sustainable, owner-independent companies. Bradley, welcome to the show.
Mark, it's great to be with you.
So I want to jump off about the wonderful world of entrepreneurship. I am technically a solopreneur. I became a solopreneur when my company fired me back in July 2005. And I made a ton of mistakes when I first became a solopreneur. Which a solopreneur means you work for yourself. Entrepreneur means you have people working for you, just so my audience understands. And I wish I knew now, the old axiom, I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I knew now, because I made so many mistakes. So how long have you been an entrepreneur?
Since 2009.
Okay. Was it voluntary or involuntary like mine?
Yeah, I guess I'd always thought about entrepreneurship as voluntary. Even in your situation, you still chose to jump into being your own boss, so to speak. And so mine was voluntary. I had a really great opportunity. I had a great career. And as a matter of fact, I was being plucked to kind of work up the corporate ladder. I was going to move to Chicago. And I decided not to do that and decided to start my own small business. And I started late 2009, early 2010. So mine was definitely that way. I learned a lot from my dad. My dad's a small business owner in agriculture. And so I think it was always in my blood.
You bring up a very interesting point, because after I got fired, I had a decision to make. Do I try to get another corporate job, or do I try this whole thing? I didn't even know what the term solopreneur meant at that time. I decided to become an entrepreneur. So you're very correct. That is a very distinct decision I made, because I could have gone back in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So share with us some of your early lessons when you got into this world of entrepreneurship. Maybe some of the lessons that were less pleasant, shall we say.
Yeah. Well, most of the things that I even share on my podcast and with our members really have come from a place of pain. I mean, most of the things do come from that place of, sure, we've had a lot of successes, absolutely, but I'll share a lot more of the mistakes that I've made along the way. I've always believed, and maybe it's my sports athletic background of growing up being on teams, but I always saw business from the jump as a team sport. I never have thought about business from a solopreneur perspective. And so that is a fundamental, we call it a maxim, but a belief that we have is that business is a team sport. I believe that. It does bring up a lot of challenges when you are leading people. My goodness gracious, even just this week inside one of my companies, you start dealing with leadership challenges and cultural things and sometimes fighting within team members that you have to deal with. And so the big part of my early success came from my ability to sell and to work my tail off. But a lot of my failures came from I didn't know how to recruit. I didn't know how to onboard. I didn't know how to train people. I just knew how to do what I was doing. Nobody had taught me and said, oh, you're going to start your business. You need to go to business school first. And we're going to teach you how to hire. We're going to teach you how to train. We're going to teach you how to develop people. We're going to teach you how to devise compensation plans. We're going to teach you how to run weekly team meetings. We're going to teach you how to run one-to-ones. We're going to teach you how to set goals in the business. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was how to work my butt off, which I picked up from my dad. I really believe I picked up the work ethic of a farmer from my father. It's harvest season even to this day. He's 70 years old. I promise you, he works harder than pretty much anybody that I know. And I'm so grateful for that. And so I took, if you would call that a skill, but I took that and my ability to sell into my early business. And that's exactly what I needed. It gave lift into the business. It got the business off the ground. But that business was born and built off my back and my network. And it worked up until it didn't. And then ultimately, I ran out of time. I just ran out of time. There wasn't enough time in the day, certainly not enough time in the 5 days, in the work week. So it bled into Saturdays and it bled into Sundays. And early on, kids were young. really young. My son was born my first year of starting the business. And so you excuse it. I'm building for the future. I'm building for the future. We'll be there one day, Mark, and things will change, and things will change, and things will change. Well, eventually nothing changes. As a matter of fact, it starts getting worse. You start going on family trips to Disney and you're running team meetings. And these are all like a lot of pain. So, those are just a handful of some of the mistakes that I made really early on that really came from things that would be, most people would say are positive, right? How would you say hard work is a negative thing? Well, it wasn't a negative thing up until the point that something needed to change. And it only took for me to really have a health scare. I didn't know it at the time. It was just panic attacks. But I thought it was a health scare to actually kind of begin to snap some sense into me.
What you shared really resonated with me when you said you didn't know what you're doing in many aspects of the business when you first started. When I got fired and decided to become a solopreneur, I also didn't know what I was doing. I've been my entire life was in the corporate world. And I realize now that I suffered from what I call the 3 C's: courses, coaches, and conferences. Now, it wasn't the coaches, the courses, and the conferences that were an issue. What was the issue is I didn't hire the right coaches. I didn't invest in the right courses, and I didn't go to the right conferences. That's totally my fault, but I didn't know. And I'm a no excuses kind of guy. Now, as I look at it on entrepreneur/solopreneur for, 18 years, I'm not good at math. I don't do math on the show. But now I realize I wish I would have slowed down, number one. And number two, I wish I would have understood the power of mentors. I wish I would have reached out to someone who was an entrepreneur and say, hey, can I buy you lunch, or can I pay a couple $100 or whatever? What should I be focusing on? Because now I'm really clear what I should be focusing on. But back then, I was trying to do it on my own. And you make a good point about business is a team sport. Even though I consider myself a solopreneur, my wife edits all the podcasts. I look at AI as a team player, always shows up, never calls in sick, don't need health benefits for it. But you're absolutely right. Nobody is truly solo. And I'm going to date myself here. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. So everybody needs somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that obviously, like you said, having your wife on there, they don't have to be necessarily W-2 employees. I mean, fractional VAs and EAs are super popular now, and for good reason. I totally agree with that. I think that's a really good mindset way to look at it. But I also think that this really has to do a lot with what is someone's vision. Now, we call it your business blueprint. In our world, I made the transition myself. I was the rainmaker of my business. I used to call myself the rainmaker of my business. I remember specifically going and doing speaking engagements and would proudly let people know that my job is to be the rainmaker of my business, And they were like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And so now I say I transitioned, and what we help business owners to do is transition to become the architect of their business. And that's both an identity shift, it's a mindset change, and it also is some milestones along the way to become the architect. It's both philosophical in nature, but there's also a defined journey. And so we can get into that if you want to in a bit. But to further to close the loop of that thought is I went from being the rainmaker to becoming the architect of my business. And so even wherever you are, what really matters to me is what is your business blueprint? And we look at your business blueprint in 3 ways. Some people would call this our goal setting framework. I tend to not use that language of goal setting, but effectively it's what it is. What are you trying to accomplish in 3 years? What are you trying to do this year? And what are you trying to do over the next 90 days? So 3 year, 1 year, 90. 3 year vision, 1 year objectives and key results, and quarterly targets. What does this have to do with what you mentioned? The reason I bring this up is if your vision is big enough, you're going to have a team to help you to do it. You're not going to get to 3 million by yourself. I've yet to see it happen. Sure, Is there maybe going to come a time somebody has AI and takes it and chat GPT to 1 billion? Sure. But that doesn't exist yet. And nobody has done it yet. And I don't know if somebody is going to, look, it may happen down the road. And if it does, great. Okay. But up until this point, with what we know, that's not possible. You're going to have a team to make you to do it. But if your vision is to be wherever that is, whether it's you, yourself, or people listening to it, I think that's the beautiful thing is you don't have to. You don't have to have a vision of $1 million business. You don't have to have a vision of a $3 million business. You don't have to have a vision of a $10 million company. Okay. But if you do, you're going to have to bring people along the ride with you.
I like to frame my success around happiness. And the best way I can explain this is something I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say. He said, I know people who make $50,000 a year. They're home for dinner every night. They go to all the kids' soccer games. They go to all the kids' recitals, and they're happy. And he said, I also know people who make $50 million a year who are miserable. Yeah. And so I think we are each individual unique as our fingerprints of how we define success. Now, For example, let's say I'll be happy if I made $500,000 a year, just pulling that number out of thin air. Well, nobody else can say, well, you're not successful. Why? You don't know what my definition of success is. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Yep. 100% I agree with it. What is key is that you have one. The problem is that I have run into, I almost want to say 100% of the time, but my mind is just going back over the last 3 years because I don't want to make this to be a bigger thing than it is, but it is absolutely north of 90% of people that have come into our world, even people that haven't joined our program for some reason. They jump on a sales call with us. They talk to myself or somebody on the team, and even regardless if they do or don't join, to a person. One of the questions, and if somebody listens to this and they jump on a call with us, this is one of the questions we're going to ask you. Lean out for me 3 years. What do you want to have happen that if you were looking back over this 3-year period of time, that you would be super satisfied with your progress that you've made, both personally and professionally? Sometimes people can answer that in a pretty specific way. Well, today I'm at this point. I'd love to be here. Revenue, profit, personal income, flexibility, freedom. This is my role I'd love to do. This is what our team would look like. This is what the business would look like, et cetera. There have been a handful of those. And then I'll say, do you have that documented? No. What tends to happen is like we have this somewhat idea picture that bounces around in our brain a lot. What you mentioned is regardless of what that happiness looks like for your personal income, and I'll even give a very specific example of what I just got off of a Zoom call with somebody a minute ago, and I'll tell you what he said, and I'll make it very real. The key is that you have defined what success looks like versus it's just a generalized mess. I've not actually defined what success looks like specifically. And so we'll even share with our members, what is your ideal personal income lifestyle target number? How much do you need to make as an entrepreneur? And it tends to be like in business circles, we just don't talk about that. It just doesn't come up very much. And then we'll ask the next question is, well, what does your business need to do in revenue and profit in order to make that happen? And that level of clarity is incredibly important. So I just had a business owner. He makes $5,000 a month personally. He said, honestly, man, I have to tell you, it would change my family's life if I was able to personally make $25,000 a month. And the reason that would be is because my wife could retire. He said, honestly, right now, new business, by the way, like 2 years. Okay. Brand new business. I mean, he's infant stages. He's like, it's a lot of pressure. If my wife loses our job, we'd be in a tough spot. So he has a big driver of like, I want to get my business to this point so that I'm making this personal money so that my wife doesn't feel the pressure of, oh my gosh, I'm paying all of the bills for the family. And if I lose my job, we're in a world of hurt. That's real life. So we took that, reverse engineered what his revenue and profit needs to be, put together a roadmap for how's he going to get there? What is it going to look like? How's he going to get there? What's the revenue? How many customers does he need to add? All of those kind of things. And now he starts to feel like he's actually got a plan to be able to get to what his number is. For somebody to listen to this, your number may be a lot less than that, and it may be way more than that. But I think, to me, that's how I like to do business anyway.
You said one of my favorite words, clarity. A lot of people don't have clarity. So even though I'm known as Mr. Productivity, I've yet to have a client come to me and say, hey, I want to be more productive. They say, I want to be less overwhelmed. That's kind of vague. It's like being more productive. What does that mean? And so we get on the call and we're like, okay, I ask them, what does that mean to you? How will you know you're less overwhelmed? How will you know you're more productive? And I get the silence because they never thought about it that way, because to your point, they think in vague terms.
Yeah.
And I'm asking them to get very specific. As a matter of fact, what I do with clients is you pay me one time and I work with you until you get the results. Whether it's one call, 1 month, 6 months, doesn't matter. But I won't do that unless we nail down a very specific, measurable metric that we can say, okay, we're moving closer to our goal. I don't coach people with vague goals because I think you agree with this. How are you supposed to direct the ship if you don't know where you're going specifically?
Generalizations kill clarity. That's it. Generalizations kill clarity. I mean, I love the fact that you can't really help somebody unless you know exactly what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And yeah, I totally agree with that. That's why we've defined specifically, we work with businesses doing 300,000 to 3 million. We help them to become the architect of their business. Okay. What does that mean? We use a acronym called that business owners are familiar with, called SCALE. What business owner doesn't want to scale their business? But even that is wishy-washy. It means nothing. It's an empty thing. It just means more. Well, we use it as an acronym to define these 5 things. You got a business doing over $1 million in top line revenue. And if you're at $1 million, you get your business to 3. 2, it's growing and it's profitable. We use a term called the rule of 40. So your combined year-over-year growth plus your profitability is 40 or more. You take at least 12 weeks off in a year. You have an executive assistant to give you leverage in the business and buy back your time. And you have an operating system that the business runs on, so it's not running on your personality alone. And so that is SCALE: sustainable revenue, consistent growth and profitability, time away, leverage with an executive assistant, and efficient operations. That's what we do. So even in our case, we've defined what the outcome is of the thing that we help people to do. And that took me a long time to kind of quantify what are the results that we get. Well, we work on this and work on this, but ultimately I needed to define the actual outcome of our program, because there's a lot of coaches out there, and a lot of great coaches for that matter, or consultants or advisors, et cetera. But I wanted to be known for results, period. But even if you say that, you have to define what the results are. And for somebody to listen to this, they may say, well, we do 5 million top line revenue. We are growing and profitable. I take plenty of time off. I have an EA and I've got the business runs an operating system. Great. You've become the architect of your business. But for most of our clients, they've not done that.
What came to mind when you were talking about vagueness, and vagueness kills businesses and vagueness kills clarity? I think about a GPS. When you use your phone's GPS, you give it a very specific destination. If you want to go to Disney World, you don't say somewhere in Florida. You give it the specific location of the hotel or the park or whatever. And so I am shocked at the number of people who think they have clarity, and you probably experience the same thing too. They get on a call and you ask them, how clear are you? Oh, about a 9. And by the end of the call, they're like, think about a 0. Well, you're not a 0, but you're certainly not a 9. And one of the joys I love, and you probably do as well, correct me if I'm wrong, is helping people see the light that, okay, you thought you had clarity. You really don't have clarity, but it's okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here to help you with.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Mr. Productivity, and a quick timeout from the episode. I have two big favors to ask of you. If you are watching or listening to this on Spotify, first of all, if you would give me a follow, that would help the Spotify algorithm to serve this podcast up to other people so I can help them like I'm helping you. And would you leave me a comment? There's a place here on Spotify where you can send me a comment. You can say hello. You can say, what up, dog? You can say, hey, Mr. Productivity, love the podcast today. Just remember, Mr. is all spelled out, M-I-S-T-E-R, Mr. Productivity. Hey, thanks for your attention. Let's get back to the episode. Woohoo!
100%. The context of what I'm about to say is slightly different, but the principle remains the same. And that is, as an example, I was going over with a client, but this happens a lot, is we'll start going over, like, do they know their numbers? So we have an asset called Know Your Numbers. I mean, what business owner's not heard that? Oh, you need to know your numbers. The question is what numbers do you need to know? So things like, in their marketing, cost per lead. What's your cost per lead? What's your customer acquisition cost? What is your average customer value, your ACV? I mean, I could keep going on and on and on. How many customers do you have? What's your lifetime value of customers? So on and so on and so on and so on and so forth. And so it's important to know that so that when we're building an actual roadmap to get you from where you are to where you want to go, we need to use some business metrics and some KPIs to be able to do that, right? That way it's not a fantasy. There's a literal roadmap. To your point, if we're going to go to Disney, I'm going to get on the interstate. I'm going to go 65 south to Birmingham. And then from Birmingham, we're going to go to Atlanta, whatever the case may be, right? Or if we're flying, we're going to go from Huntsville to Atlanta to Orlando, whatever it is. And when I was going over these numbers with him the last time, and then we jumped on his second call to do this, he said, Bradley, I can't believe I've been in business this long, and I just had no idea. I didn't know any of these numbers, and I feel guilty, and honestly, I feel frustrated. And I said, Brian, look, if you did not know any better, you can't be held responsible for what you didn't know. But now that you do know, you are absolutely held responsible. Now that you do know that these are the numbers you need to know. And so to me, it's one of those things that if you're listening to this and you don't have a very clear vision of where you want your business, I mean, that's the context of obviously that I live in. If you don't really have a context of really what you want from your personal life, right? And you don't have an idea of like the vision of what the business is going to be to fuel that for you personally, both financially and fulfillment and the joy of what you get to do, et cetera, right? I think that that's a really important place to start, because whether it's coaches and courses and what was the other one you said? Coaches, courses, and conferences. Yeah. I'm going to steal that. I use the 3 C's, but I use it in a different context, but I'm going to steal that definitely. But still, those are great. They're so great. Some of those have transformed my life in such positive ways. The difference is the ones that have had the biggest impact have been the ones that I needed that helped me to get me where I am to where I know I'm trying to go, versus I'm just searching. So I'm going just to get ideas and I'm just floating around. And that is, to me, the biggest difference, that if you know I'm at this in revenue and I'm really trying to learn what does it take to get my business from $500,000 to $1 million, and I think the constraint of my business is marketing, well, then if you go to a marketing conference, you're going to get a bunch of ideas on how to market your business, okay? Mm-hmm. Or if it's sales, and you go to a Jeremy Miner conference or listen to, buy his course or something like that to develop yourself and your team to sell better, if that's the theory, that's the constraint of your business, that will help you. That will absolutely help you. But if we're buying courses and going to conferences and even hiring coaches, to do this. I guess one caveat is if you don't have to that is if you went and hired a coach to help you to craft a vision. Like if you were like, I need a vision, and you went to a coach that helps you specifically do that, then that would be certainly one unique situation. But I totally agree. Coaches, courses, consultants, but even podcasts, books, YouTube videos, all of those things, I try now to curate only the content that's coming to me that's not just in case reading, just in case listening, but I look at it as just in time. Right now in one of my businesses, there's a specific problem I'm trying to solve. And so I am taking in content from books, podcast, YouTube videos, et cetera, even considering, hiring a coach in this one particular area to help us solve that problem. And I'm not trying to solve any other problem. That is the constraint of that business. That is the problem I'm trying to solve. And that feels much more like a rifle approach instead of a shotgun approach.
I love the power of one, which goes right along what you just said. So I didn't do this in the beginning. And everybody had pitched me something. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll buy your course. Now getting your membership and I'll invest in you. And I didn't have clarity with what I wanted. Yeah. That's my problem. And I caused a tremendous strain on my family. I had no idea what I'm doing. But now, like you, I figure out what do I want to learn and I go all in. So right now for me, it's marketing. I'm reading a great book by Michael Michalowicz. I hope I probably butchered his name. He's got a book called Get Different. And the whole premise of the book is most people in their industry market just like everyone else. So everyone's a gray suit. He said, you want to be the guy wearing the red suit. Yeah. And so I'm going all in on that because, yeah, there's the big names in how to market, Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk, but you can't just limit yourself to the big guys. There's a lot of very smart people on whatever topic you want to learn. And you just can't read one book or watch one video or listen to one podcast. I think you have to go and try out other people's thoughts and go, I like that thought. I don't like this one. This isn't going to fit with me. That's not me. Instead of a lot of people are just like robots. They find one person, they follow that person, and everyone else who follows that person, because you know who they are. You can see them on social media. They're all doing the same thing and they're not sticking out. They are in a sea of C-ness instead of standing out like a red herring.
Mike Michalowicz is great. He's actually come on my podcast.
You nailed his name. Good job.
I guess I've gotten used to it. I've read several of his books. He's probably most famous for his book, Profit First. His other books, Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, Pumpkin Plan, Get Different's great. Next, I think, is another one. So he's a pretty prolific author. But yeah, I totally agree. Bigger point is that you have identified what you believe is the current constraint of your business, and you're going about solving that. Even if it's not a constraint, maybe it's just something like, hey, I really feel that this is a skill deficiency, something that I want to develop. And so going and devouring that content and then moving on to the next thing. But if we're just taking in content for content's sake, look, if you're going to watch perfect videos, you're going to watch Ryan Trahan on YouTube, or you're going to watch Mr. Beast on YouTube because you just want to watch content to watch content, so fine. My kids do that all the time. Well, that's okay. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about business. What is the problem I'm trying to solve in business, and how do I go about doing that? Again, some things can be edutainment, right? They can be kind of entertainment in a way. I think it's great. There's no problem with that. But I used to just if you recommended a book, like right now, if you were like, oh, Bradley, have you read Get Different? I'd be like, no. Well, in about 4 seconds, I'd had that in my Amazon cart and it'd be shipped to my house. Now I might go to Amazon, but I'll put it on a wish list. I'll just save it for the future, because it's like, I don't need to read that book right now. I mean, I'm happy to be looking at a book right now on the 4 Seasons. Well, if customer success, client success and having an exceptional experience in your business. There's actually two. There's one called The New Gold Standard, written about the Ritz-Carlton. And I remember specifically reading those two books because in one of my companies, I really wanted to level up the customer experience. That was something I felt like we were lacking. I didn't think we were onboarding super well. I didn't think we were taking good care of the customers. I would talk about good customer service, but even that's empty. What does that mean? How do you define that? What is the specific skills? Oh, you stand up, you shake their hand, you look them in the eye, you tell them when they leave and walk out the door, you stand up, walk them to the door. Oh, okay. That's what that means. That's an example. Well, if I recommended you those books, unless that's the thing that you need to solve in the business, that's a waste of time.
One of my things that have changed really recently is my approach to social media. So I used to think I was Gary Vaynerchuk and I had to be on every social media platform. I was on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and X and Snapchat and LinkedIn and YouTube. And I don't know if I left any out, Threads, whatever. And my current coach said, are you getting leads from those? I'm like, well, no. Any email signups, any DMs, nothing. He goes, why are you wasting your time on there? My number one network is LinkedIn. So I actually deleted my Facebook and TikTok accounts. And I don't mean I deleted the app off the phone. I deleted my accounts. Never got anything out of it because all my clients are coming from LinkedIn. Yep. So the number one priority for me is LinkedIn. Now, I may post sometimes on other platforms, but here's something I don't do on social media, which is really going to blow people's minds for the most part. I never scroll on social media. Never. I post and I leave. My power is happening in the DMs on LinkedIn. I have a very specific niche and I am connecting with them and having great conversations in the DM until I get them off the platform and on a call. Mm-hmm. I used to think the magic was to be like Gary Vee and be on every single platform. Maybe you do. Or maybe Facebook is where you should put all your focus. Or maybe your email list should you focus. Too many people there's a new social media website, a new social media platform like, ooh, squirrel. And they're wasting time and their audience may not be on there. Not everybody's on LinkedIn. Maybe your audience is on X or is on TikTok. But I don't think you need to be everywhere unless you're a big person like Gary or Grant and you have the team, because they don't do it themselves. They have a team, but they have prospects all these platforms. And when you're a smaller business, and I don't know how we're going to define small, we don't even have to define it on the podcast. The smaller the business, you got to be really careful about where you're spending your time. This goes along with reading the right books or watching the right videos. You got to make sure you're doing the right things. And of course, you're not always going to do the right thing. You're human. You're going to make dumb mistakes. We all make dumb mistakes. But instead of rushing in because it's a brand new app, maybe you should go, is my audience there? Because when you spend time on this network, if your audience isn't there, that's time away from things you should be working on.
Yeah, for sure. Whenever you're choosing a strategy, let's take social media as an example, which you were sharing there. There's effectively unlimited choices against limited resources. And you can be everywhere on every platform, post multiple times a day if you have the resources to do it. And the resources come in the form of typically your team, money, financial resources, and even energy and bandwidth, right? And so you're right. The big guys, they just go about their day. They maybe occasionally will film some stuff specifically for social media, but they're able to distribute it because they have a team that's very, very well paid to be able to do so. And so I think your strategy of picking a platform and going deep with it is smart.
Before we wrap up, I want to make sure people don't miss the blueprint framework. 3-year vision. I'm pretty sure you agree with me here. Don't keep it in your head. Write it down so it's real. Number 2, what are your objectives and KPIs this year? And number 3, 90-day goals. And of course, as Mr. Productivity, I'm a big planner. I don't care if it's a Saturday or Sunday. I'm always telling my time where to go instead of wondering where it went. A lot of people are busy, but I've been saying you can be busy being productive, but just because you're busy doesn't mean you're productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're going to go to Disney World for a week, every night you should go, tomorrow we're going to go to Magic Kingdom for the day. Intentionally spend that time. But a lot of people only plan the real stuff. Well, no, you have a life, and I think you should account for 24 hours. So is there any final thoughts you want to leave us regarding the blueprint framework or something else before we wrap up?
Yeah, just to tighten up on some of the language of that. So 3-year vision. 3-year vision. I don't subscribe to anything past 3 years for the vision of the business. I don't subscribe to a 10-year snapshot or a 25-year snapshot. There's too many changes. You want to do that in your personal life, for sure. But 3 years, go back to November of 2021. That's not that far off. That's not that far back. You can kind of go back and go, oh yeah, I remember actually where the business was in November of 2021. Well, same thing's going to happen in November of 2027. So that's long enough to get something meaningful done. But at the same time, it's still short enough that you can't mess around with that. So 3 years has been a great framing. We have a number of members that have gone already through creating their second 3-year vision. Great books. Cameron Herold has got one if you want to go deep on that topic specifically. Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold and then Vision Driven Leader by Michael Hyatt. Both of those two books are great, kind of around that topic specifically. The second one is, we call it 1-year OKRs. That's objectives and key results. I love that framing or that methodology for 1 year. And the reason is as an example, if you ask a business owner, what do you want to get done this year? As a matter of fact, at the time of this recording, we're about 3-4 weeks away from our annual planning workshop. So we do an annual planning workshop every year. And coming out of that workshop, you will have your 2025 1-year objectives and key results documented. And I love the objective because you can get a business owner to summarize, what are you trying to do? Well, underneath that are the key results. Well, what needs to be true in order for that thing to have happened? And so I love that framing. Obviously, we could go deeper on that. There's a great book called Measure What Matters, written by John Doerr on OKRs, the OKR framework. And then quarterly targets. So what are we trying to get done in 3 years? What are we trying to get done this year? And what do we need to get done in the next 90 days? If you think about the 3-year vision, there is 12 quarters. There's 12 quarters. And so if we can just start stacking the dominoes, that's the way I like to refer to it. Stack the dominoes. How many dominoes? 12. And if I can take one domino, a quarter, knock that down. And then I can take another quarter and I knock that one down. Then ultimately, we hope that we can have it to be literally like dominoes, where you hit one and then the dominoes start to fall over each other. And so I like to think of it as stacking the dominoes. So the business blueprint. If you have a business, if you're going to become the architect of your business, you need a blueprint. That's what architects use. And so your business blueprint is, this is what we're trying to do in 3 years. This is what we're trying to get done this year. And this is what we're trying to get done over the next 90 days. That will give you, and more importantly, your team, a very clear picture of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And this whole podcast has really been around a lot around clarity. I think we've kind of landed the plane there to say, hey, cool, I need to have clarity, but how do I actually do that? That's the framework to use.
Oh, 100%. And thank you for correcting me, because obviously you teach this stuff and I only heard it for the first time today. So I appreciate that. So where can people go to find out more about you and what you're doing in the world?
They want to check out me or connect with me personally. LinkedIn's a great place to connect with me personally. They want to learn more about Blueprint OS, our program that we have. They can go to blueprintos.com/assets and then go to the main page. But if they want to go to blueprintos.com/assets, got a number of free tools that they can check out there. And then if they want to listen to me on my podcast, they can check out my podcast on all the places that it's at Above the Business. Above the Business is the name of my podcast.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your information. Like every one of my guests, I learned something. And I'll be honest, I kind of like have people on like you to, teach me something, and I just share it with the world. After you go to Bradley's website, please go to mine, MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. If you are watching or listening to this on Spotify, I would really appreciate a follow, and you can leave me a comment on Spotify, and I will reply. I'll be back real soon with a brand new episode. Until then, stay productive and stay positive.